I would say this. I think that Christianity is the most thoughtful, well thought out religion, if you want to call it that, philosophy of life, way of living ever. And it's only that because God exists and God is the foundation and the author of Christianity. That's why it's true. So, how about this? We went through some of the evidence for the Bible being trustworthy. What about the evidence that Jesus rose from the dead? If he didn't rise from the dead, then he's not Savior. So what evidence do we have that Jesus rose from the dead? If you can't observe it, nobody alive saw Jesus die and rise from the dead. Nobody alive today, right? Anybody disagree with that? Anybody know anybody that will say, honestly, and you believe them, I saw Jesus die, 3 days later I saw him rise from the dead. Nobody saw it. Can we recreate that happening? No. Okay, so any of you that feel this, science has disproven that Jesus rose from the dead. Hold on a second. Science has not. If you can't observe it, you can't recreate it. And that's the scientific method. So it's not about science. So we would want to do this. This is what is logical. And it's not faith-based. What makes sense? That you would look at the scholarly evidence and you would judge the veracity or the truth of what the Bible says about Jesus living, being crucified, and rising from the dead under the same standards as anything else that we examine from ancient history. It's the same standard. So we'll go back briefly to what we talked about in the Bible a few weeks ago. And when we look for evidence for ancient civilizations, for people of history that we take for granted, they existed, they did all the things that we claim that they did. Caesar. We have 10 manuscripts or copies from Caesar's writings that tell us what Caesar did. And we have several other writers who wrote of what Caesar did, How he lived, that he was an emperor, that he was assassinated, his military campaigns. He's one of the most famous people in history, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, but that's based upon about 10 manuscripts that were written 1,000 years after the fact, after Caesar lived. 1,000 years. 10 manuscripts, 1,000 years after. We have no idea what was written in that 1,000-year gap. Could be something completely different. This is what people say is the reason that the Bible is not true, because it's written over, all this time has passed since the New Testament times and Jesus, and we have all these copies that have been made, and there's no possible way that they could all be the same copies, right? People could write something in there that wasn't true, and what was written in the first century cannot be the same as what we have in our Bibles today. Because so many authors, so many copies. But we take for granted everything that we are taught in history classes. The most recognized colleges and historians in the world base what they teach us about Caesar on 10 manuscripts, which are copies, not the originals, copies that are written 1,000 years after he died. Nothing in between those 1,000 years. The Bible, over 24,000. Caesar, 10 copies. The Bible, 24,000 manuscripts, full and partial. Some of them, we have partial manuscripts, fragments that are dated within the generation of Jesus. And full manuscripts just 2 or 3 generations after. What that means is that there's not enough time frame for people to begin to make something up, because people are alive at the time that it's written and being read and being copied. And anybody that was there and said this didn't happen could stand up and say, this didn't happen. Because there's eyewitnesses. This is the historical record, the historical evidence, the historical proof. 1, that Jesus existed. 2, that Jesus claimed to be God. That's why the Jews tried to kill him several times. Blasphemy. You killed somebody in Israel who said, I am God, or I am like God. And the Jews tried to kill Jesus because he said, I am God. The historical record is indisputable. the manuscript evidence is overwhelming. There's nothing like it. There's no historic person of ancient history that has more evidence that he lived and died, and all the things that we know about Jesus compared to all the other. Name the ancient historic person: Alexander, Caesar, any of the Greek or the Roman philosophers, Plato, Aristotle. We have more evidence that Jesus lived, did miracles, claimed to be God, healed people rose from the dead at his word than the life of any of these other people. Overwhelming. It's not even close. But the Bible and Jesus is the one that we doubt and we make fun of Christians for.